Welcome to another edition of our Friday night Bible study brought to you by the Israelite Nation Worldwide Ministries. I am Minister Dinah, and I'm joined by the lovely
Rachel.
And we are here tonight broadcasting from Atlanta, Georgia. And we are so excited to be with you all tonight to share what we have come to understand about the greatest God in the universe, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And we have a very interesting topic to share tonight. It's a little bit about us as a people. Israelites, we have an awesome privilege of being God's chosen people. And even those of us, children of slavery, those so-called black folks or Jacobites in the world, we feel like there needs to be an understanding for them as well as far as, their place in this world. And our message tonight is really about knowing your worth, Israel. As Israelites, we need to understand our worth, our value. As Israelites, the God of Israel has told us that we are the royal priesthood, yes. Right? We are precious stones. And the fortunate thing is that those of us who know that we are Israel, we've come into that understanding. But there's so many of our people who do not know their worth. It's all in this scripture, yes. Right? So that's what we're here to share with you about tonight. Do you want to add anything?
Yeah, it's so funny, this topic that we came up with. Earlier a few weeks ago, I was looking through Instagram and the topic of presence came up. And basically this influencer was just talking about how they'd met different celebrities, and some celebrities were, just stunning, gorgeous, but they had no presence when they walked in the room. And it made me wonder, like, a lot of people say either you got it or you don't, but what I do know is that presence is something that's inherent. And I feel that self-worth is at the basis of that. And you said it already, it's like, when you know or have an understanding that you are deserving of the very best in life, you're able to have a strong and positive self-worth. And like you said, if our Father is the King, right, then we deserve royalty.
Absolutely.
And we have to walk in that.
Right. We definitely have to walk in that presence. And like you said, once we come into the understanding of who we are, it's almost like you carry yourself in a different way.
That's absolutely
for me, like, unlike you were raised in Israel. But when I came to the understanding of who I was probably about your age.
Wow.
And it's funny because when you do learn about who you are and you have that identity and you have this culture, it gives you a sense of like, I don't know, you feel uplifted, you feel empowered. And you also feel a responsibility to conduct yourself in a certain way when you understand that you are a child of the Most High God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Like, you can't be acting a fool out in them streets, right? You gotta conduct yourself, to be worthy of that calling.
Absolutely.
And I always remember one of the things our master teacher, Elder Charbach, says is that, we have to love ourselves first. Right? If you don't love yourself first, you can't really love anybody else. You have nothing to really truly give to anybody else, or even back to the God of Israel.
No value.
It all starts, like you said, internally, knowing who you are. And when I think of it from that perspective, it makes me appreciate Israel even more.
Absolutely.
But also understand that those who are the Jacobites or so-called black people, how much they're missing out.
Yes.
Right? So it's interesting, but that's what we're talking about today. Know your worth. And one of the main things that our people suffer from, and understanding our worth, is that we often tend to follow other nations.
Yes.
And that is definitely our downfall. So knowing your worth, you shouldn't have to follow, you should lead,
yes,
right?
Absolutely.
So we want to look in the scriptures. We're going to get into it tonight and hit on some points, about knowing your worth and your value. And we're going to start this out with, do not follow other nations. Do not. Like, why would you? If you are the royal priesthood, if your God is the creator of heaven and earth, why would you even think to follow other nations?
Yeah, I think it's such a important point to consider, because being Israel, we are so different from other people. You know, we have a uniqueness about ourselves. And if for me, it's like, if self-worth is inherent, like knowing that you value and you contribute something as an Israelite, and you are trying to copy someone else, you can't have self-worth because you're trying to be someone else. You're tapping into someone else's value and their qualities that they have. And so how can you have self-worth if you want to copy and emulate other people that aren't even following the same path as you?
Yep. And it's like, you know, the whole thing you hear today is about walking your truth,
Yes.
right? So if you're not walking in that and you're following another nation, it's like you're walking in a lie.
Right,
It's
exactly.
not. You have to have integrity. You have to be genuinely who you are, because if you're not, you're going to lose. You have no foundation. You're just kind of.
It's so funny because I was thinking about this the other day. In college, I was a resident advisor, and one of the things we would do the first weeks that I did first year students, one of the things we would do the first weeks they would get there is sort of this program where we sort of talk to them about their values. You know, we have them outline, we give them a list of values, and they have to outline their top values that they hold on to. And while the program was intensive, it was long, so I low-key hated it. I realized the value in that because it sort of allows you to take on this new journey, being in college, trying to find your way, exploring new things, having your core values. You know what matters to you.
Right.
And so even when you're confused or lost, you can go back to those values and use that as a guide to find it. And it's the same way with Israel.
Absolutely. And it goes back to, I guess, what we started with, talking about love of self, because you go in, what you described as introspective, right? What do I believe? What matters to me?
Yes.
What makes me happy? What makes me sad? What are my, how do I want the world to see me? All those are your, kind of inner core values. And there's more, but what if you don't have them? That's why I say I appreciate Israel so much, because it gives you
those to have. That's true.
You don't have to kind of figure it out. It's there, right? We have examples. But let's get into it. Let's talk about it. So we're talking about know your worth, Israel. And we're going to start off with the whole idea of not following other nations, because if you know your worth, you're going to lead other nations. So let's look in the book of Genesis. We're going to go to chapter 34. Genesis chapter 34. And we're going to start with verse 1, and I'm going to read, and we'll just take it from there. So Genesis chapter 34, verse 1, it says, "And Dinah, the daughter of Leah, which she bare unto Jacob, went out to see the daughters of the land." So right there, to me, this sets up something not so positive, right? Because she's going out to look and see what the other folks, other nations are doing, right? She's going out to explore, and I'm all for exploring, but like you said, you got to keep your core values, right? Verse 2, "And when Shechem, the son of Hamor, the Hivite, prince of the country, saw her, he took her and lay with her and defiled her. And his soul clave unto Dinah, the daughter of Jacob, and he loved the damsel and spake kindly unto the damsel." So key thing here in verse 2, it says he defiled her, right? So we're not going to go into all the details. For adults, we know what happened. But I want to really call out the reason why it says that she's defiled, because this is a different nation. This is not Israel.
They don't do the same thing.
Right. And the key thing is what they don't do is what? No circumcision, right? So that's critical, right? Our men are circumcised, right? That's the signet of our covenant with our God and our relationship. So for her to go outside of that and lie with a man that is not of Israel, she's now defiled her temple, right?
I think this is such a great example too when we talk about applying the Bible to our lives, because the first verse really resonates with me because, we don't have our own land now as Israel. It's cursed, there's a little T there, a little curse, but
I mean, look at what's happening there. It's always something,
yes,
negative.
Which we can go into detail another time, but I think it really applies to our lives because now as Israelite men and women, a lot of us are in a land where we are among other people that aren't Israel.
Right.
A lot of us are friends with those people. And so I think it's a good warning to realize, what are those core values? Like you were saying, what do you value that's going to keep you from following the ways of other people? The same thing that, Dinah's experiencing now, we're in this too. This is not disconnected. It's the same thing.
And we got to think about human nature.
Yeah.
We're going to see things that are just enticing. Oh, I like the way she dressed.
Yeah.
Ooh, I like how she's doing this or that. But we always have to bring it back to our core, innate values for an Israelite, which is the covenant, right? And just like I said, at verse 1, it was really a key thing that she went out to see the daughters of the land. And then the next thing was she's defiled, right? Defiled because she laid with an uncircumcised man. So this man, his soul clave unto Dinah, we read that. And then verse 4 says, and Shechem spake unto his father Hamor, saying, get me this damsel to wife. So now Shechem, he's the guy that she laid with. He's of a different nation. He's uncircumcised. He now wants to marry her, right? And Jacob heard that he had defiled Dinah, his daughter. Now his sons were with his cattle in the field, and Jacob held his peace until they were come.
Trouble is coming.
Yeah. So think about this. Dinah is the only girl of all these 12 brothers, and this uncircumcised, at this time, Israel was separate. We were. Right? It was a big deal to be separate from these nations that were doing things contrary to what we did. So Jacob was kind of probably trying to figure out, okay, how am I going to say this? Because he knows his sons.
Yes, especially the older ones. If you see how they react, you can see why Jacob was trying to figure something out.
Yeah, he was like, okay, let me think about this. And okay, so verse 6. So and Hamor the father of Shechem went out unto Jacob to commune with him. And the sons of Jacob came out of the field when they heard it. And the men were grieved, and they were very wroth, because he had wrought folly in Israel and lying with Jacob's daughter, which thing ought not to be done. So a couple things. He was an outsider, but it was still done out of order because the discussion between fathers should have happened before anything, right? So a lot of things are out of order here. Her brothers are wroth. They're at the height of their anger. And verse 8 says, and Hamor communed with them, saying, the soul of my son Shechem longeth for your daughter. I pray you give her him to wife. And make ye marriages with us, and give your daughters unto us, and take our daughters unto you.
They are asking for a lot right there. And if you know Israel, separation is key. We always talk about separation.
Right.
We are not like the others. And so for them to be coming like, let's do this and then we can all be together.
One big family, whatever.
It's like anyone in Israel knows.
Like, what's that?
No, you need to back up.
Right, that's
And then there's another thing about this verse, his soul clave unto her. And I think what's so important is when you are so different from the rest, it's a hard walk to follow. It is. But in order to do so successfully, you really have to value the qualities that make you unique and different. They have to have some weight to you. You have to understand why you are different and see value in that. And here we see that maybe Dinah may have lost some of that, seeing the other daughters of the land. But we also see the protection that comes with knowing your worth, right? His soul clave unto her. Right. So now she has an uncircumcised man, this nation, everyone coming to be with her. It's probably more than she expected to happen.
And it just, as we read the story on, you really see the power. Yes. And you're right. She made a mistake, but this guy, he really cared about her. He was willing to go above and beyond to have her, right? He was really willing, and you'll see more as the story unfolds. Yes. But it's true. And at some point, Dinah had to kind of lose her way a little bit, and we're all human. It happens. But how do you kind of rebuild from that? But it's interesting. Again, her family, they got her. They
They were grieved. It was their, little sister.
Like, how could you? So we're going to continue on. We're in Genesis 34, and we're going to pick back up at verse 10. And it says, "And ye shall dwell with us, and the land shall be before you. Dwell and trade therein, and get your possessions therein. And Shechem said unto her father and to her brethren, Let me find grace in your eyes, and what ye shall say unto me, I will give." So Shechem, again, he's talking to Jacob. He's trying to make this marriage happen. He's being very cordial.
He is.
And very willing, because I think he understands their trespass. What they did is wrong, but he's trying to make it right. He's trying to appease his son's request. So there's a lot going on here. And verse 12 says, he's even going further, and he says, "Ask me never so much dowry and gift, and I will give according as ye shall say unto me, but give me the damsel to wife." So even here you see the value of Dinah.
Yes,
like he's like, whatever you want, I'll give you for this woman, for this Israelite girl, right?
And I think it speaks to another thing about knowing your worth, is that sort of similar with presence as well, as like you attract certain things based off of your worth. I say things because it can be energy, it can be people, it can be spirits. And that's why it's so important. Like, he saw her, he took her, he saw the value in her. Even when
he saw her light, so to speak.
Yes, exactly. Even when she may have forgotten a little bit. And I think I'm getting excited, so I need to slow down.
No, it's good. It's true.
Really important, because even if you don't take the time to know your worth, other people see it, and other people will make note of it and treat you accordingly. And it reminds me of a time in college where I went to go see one of my girlfriends, and it was supposed to be a quick visit. Ended up staying for hours because there were a group of guys in like this living room area in the dorm. We got in a deep discussion about the type of women that they choose to be with.
Oh boy.
And
were they Jacobites, or were they?
It was a mix. It was mostly Jacobites, and it was so interesting. It ended up kind of being a debate, because they were essentially saying, because they had done sort of the nice guy trope or whatever, they weren't treated right, and so they decided to seek out women that had low self-esteem, that had certain qualities, not knowing their worth, because they knew they could treat them a certain way
and get away with it.
Yes, and even taking just gender roles out of it, like that happens in real life, Israel. It's so important to know, and even Jacob. So like,
well, I'm even thinking like with Jacob, the unfortunate thing, and we've talked about how they say the group that has the hardest time finding a mate are Black women or Jacobite women and Asian men, right? And when I think about the feedback that you got from those guys, it's like, they know that our women are having a hard time. Like, you have when I was in college, it was like women would date a guy who had multiple girls, and it was okay because they just wanted somebody. They didn't know their worth, right? To wait and find somebody that's going to honor you, right? And I think some of these guys out here know that they can get away with just piss poor behavior and treatment towards other Jacobites or other Black women. And until we understand who we are and say, no, this is who I am, and you're going to treat me a certain way, that's when you'll get it. And you see that here. It's like, even Dinah was low. Like, these folks knew they had to come correct when they wanted to wife her. It wasn't going to be, just an easy road. Yeah, absolutely. Did you have anything else to add?
No, it was perfect, because it's like when after that conversation, I was like, Lord, people out here are heartless.
Right. But because they were wounded.
Yes. Yeah. And then they acted out because of that. So I think it touches into the fact that knowing your worth, again, like we said, protects yourself from that. And it allows you to create certain boundaries to also protect yourself from being depleted by something else, and the same thing happens from a spiritual standpoint as well.
And this is just not a female thing either. There's examples. We'll share more.
Yes.
This is male and female. Yes. Like, we all have to know our values so that others who see it will treat us a certain way, even when we might not always see it in ourselves.
And what you said earlier, like, Jacob and his brother is a great example of males upholding their worth. They upheld that. Right. And so that's why he had to come correct, just like you were saying.
They upheld it, and it's like, a lot of times too, you see that amongst, again, Black children or black folks or Jacobites, where a lot of women feel that the man is not standing up for them. You know what I'm saying? You see that a lot in social media where, maybe a female is getting beat down by someone of a different race, and
they're just standing.
Yeah, the ones that look like her are just standing there letting it happen. And it shouldn't be that way. You know what I'm saying? If we're united as one family, which Israel avails or gives that opportunity, we're going to stand up for each other. And that's why you see her brothers behave the way that they do. All right. So verse 13, and the sons of Jacob answered Shechem and Hamor, his father, deceitfully, and said, because he had defiled their sister. And they said unto them, we cannot do this thing, to give our sister to one that is uncircumcised, for that were a reproach unto us. So when we read verse 1, and it said just that, having that relation between Dinah and Shechem defiled her, this is how we know it was the uncircumcision, right? Because when the brothers had a chance to speak, they're like, he's uncircumcised. That was the reproach, right? Because he was uncircumcised. And it says in verse 15, but in this will we consent unto you, if ye will be as we be, that every male of you be circumcised, then will we give our daughters unto you, and we will take your daughters to us, and we will dwell with you, and we will become one people. Okay, it's critical to understand back in verse 13 where it says, Jacob's son answered deceitfully. So they're not telling the truth here. They're setting them up, okay? Because they're trying to get their revenge as to what's happened. So verse 17 says, but if you will not hearken unto us to be circumcised, then we will take our daughter and we will be gone. And their words pleased Hamor and Shechem, Hamor's son. So Hamor and his son, they agreed, okay, you can get circumcised. So, and the young man deferred not to do the thing, because he had delight in Jacob's daughter, and he was more honorable than all the house of his father. So he was an honorable guy. He was a decent guy. And again, he came to her not, I guess he wasn't in a deceitful way. He really liked her, right? So that's why the scripture calls out that he was honorable. And verse 20 says, and Hamor and Shechem, his son, came into the gate of their city and communed with the men of their city, saying, and basically what they're going to do is tell them they need to get circumcised, right? So if we go down to, let's see, where do I want to go? Verse 24, and it says, unto Hamor and unto Shechem his son hearkened all that went out of the gate of his city, and every male was circumcised, all that went out of the gate of his city. And it came to pass on the third day, when they were sore, that two of the sons of Jacob, Simeon and Levi, Dinah's brethren, took each man his sword, and came upon the city boldly, and slew all the males.
Took them while they was down.
Right. So I think the men probably can relate to this.
Yes.
The guys, they couldn't do nothing. They were in pain, so they couldn't fight in a battle. Dinah's brothers, they knew. They had a plan. They already knew what they were going to do.
Two men.
Right. And it was Simeon and Levi. If you go back and you look who, because we know Rachel and Leah had the sons, right? So, Simeon and Levi both came from Leah, same mother. So, and that was Dinah's mother. So they were a little closer than Rachel's, too. They were all of one family, but, you can see the relationship here. And it says, verse 26, and they slew Hamor and Shechem, his son, with the edge of the sword, and took Dinah out of Shechem's house and went out. The sons of Jacob came upon the slain and spoiled the city, because they had defiled their sister. They knew her worth. They
did.
Jeez. They took their sheep and their oxen and took everything, right? And their asses and that which was in the city and that which was in the field, and all their wealth and all their little ones, and their wives took they captive and spoiled even all that was in the house. And Jacob said to Simeon and Levi, ye have troubled me to make me to stink among the inhabitants of the land. So what is he saying here?
He's like, I can't live here anymore because of what y'all did.
Right. Everybody's going to know what y'all did. I need to get up out of here. Oh, man.
Now you see why he was trying to, think of something before they came.
Right, because he knew his sons, right? He was like, how I'm going to do this. Boy, so Jacob is not happy about this. He's like, everybody's going to know it. If you read verse 30, it says, I shall be destroyed, I and my house. And they said, should he deal with our sister as with an harlot? So even after their dad was like, look, y'all gonna make everybody come up against us, they still like,
period.
Okay, well, he shouldn't have did that to our sister. Like, what? Well, we not supposed to do nothing? Like,
Yes.
So it's crazy. So if you go to verse 35, chapter 35, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but basically the God of Israel, told Jacob to get out, leave, kind of like when he was escaping Esau after he stole his birthright. Get out, leave. When you get to where you go and build an altar and pray to me, because you're going to need all the help
that you can get.
But it's very interesting. It's so interesting. If we go to 35, I'm just going to read a little bit of it. Verse 1 says, and God said unto Jacob, arise, go up to Bethel and dwell there, and make thee an altar unto God that appeared unto thee when thou fleddest from the face of Esau thy brother. And then if you go down to verse 16, it says, and they journeyed from Bethel, and there was but a little way to come to Ephraim, and Rachel travailed, and she had hard labor. No, I don't need to read that one. No, I'm good. Yeah, I think I'm good. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, so he went, he built an altar. If you read chapter 35, this is also the time when his name was changed from Jacob to Israel.
Yes.
But this was a critical thing that happened. No joke. And it all started with her looking at the daughters of another.
And I think it's kind of ironic or funny that towards the end, they took all of the wealth of the land, almost as to say, like, understand this is what you're worth.
That's her value, right?
Yeah.
Her value is all your cattle, your sheep, your children, your wives, everything is on this.
Yes.
So that's a lot. Know your worth, Israelite women. Man, that's powerful. That is so powerful. That is so powerful. That is very powerful. But yeah, I hope that was a great example. You guys can put some 7s or fires in the chat if that made sense to you about knowing your worth. We can see how Dinah, looking at the other nations, it got her in trouble. But we also see, again, her brothers knew her value, and they was going to make other nations come correct, right? Because there was a distinction between clean and unclean, holy and unholy, and they was not playing. Good example. Well, let's look at another one. I think you have another example.
Yes. So we're going to flip to 1 Samuel chapter 8. And we're going to get into a great example of literally asking and looking for what the other nations have. So if you can turn with us, 1 Samuel chapter 8. All right, and it reads, verse 1, and it came to pass when Samuel was old that he made his son judges over Israel. Now the name of his firstborn was Joel, and the name of his second, Abiah. They were judges in Beersheba. And his sons walked not in the ways, but turned aside after lucre, and took bribes, and perverted judgment. So here we know during this time Israel had judges, right? And so Samuel's sons were not walking in righteousness. And when we read verse 4, we're going to see what happens as a result of that. Then all the elders of Israel gathered themselves together and came to Samuel unto Ramah, and said unto him, Behold, thou art old, and thy sons walk not in thy ways. Now make us a king to judge us like all the nations.
Wow. Like all the nations.
Literally asking to be something different. And I think this story is so great because it's twofold. Because you see, with knowing your worth, you are able to have power. And with power comes influence. Yeah. And just thinking about any leader that you see in everyday life, even here in Israel, you know that influence. On the outside. But I'm just thinking influence is something that is ever evolving, ever changing. You can lose it or you can increase it. It all depends. There are various tools to do that, to make it fluctuate. And one of the most important things I believe about being a leader is trust, is building a rapport. And Samuel's sons did not do that. They were taking bribes. They had perverted judgment. They didn't know their worth and value as being Israelites, working for the God of Israel, you know, in a position of power.
Well, do you think they knew their power and they took advantage of it?
Yes, that's
right?
a better.
And we're going to talk a little bit about how we can use our influence
That's
for
really good
negativity
point.
or power. But, you know, it's interesting, you know, Samuel was a prophet and, you know, the people trusted him because that's why they came to him. He was like, they were like, you're getting old.
Yes.
Your sons ain't doing right. We need something, right? So the accountability really goes back to the leadership, right? If they were doing right, would the people have even asked for a king? So in a sense, you do blame the Israelites that asked for a king, but also because the leadership wasn't doing what they're supposed to do, it kind of created that situation too.
So you have this sort of
duality.
Yes,
to it.
exactly. Because Israel is blinded by what they see physically.
Yes, always.
Yes,
they forget the
that's
spirit.
always it. So it's so important. This is only a small part of our lives. We have to learn to look holistically at the bigger picture.
And back to Dinah.
Yes.
She saw, you know, physical with the daughters of the nation. Again, focusing on the physical,
but wasn't
not the
thinking
spiritual.
about what would happen spiritually.
Exactly.
And because of that, they were so caught up in the trust and rapport of Samuel's sons that they forgot about the trust and rapport of the God of Israel. And we're going to see what the God of Israel says to Samuel that relates to that. Let's see what verse.
Verse 6?
Yes. Verse 6. But the thing displeased Samuel when they said that. Give us a king to judge us. And Samuel prayed unto the Lord. And the Lord said unto Samuel, Hearken unto the voice of the people and all that they say unto thee. For they have not rejected thee, but they have rejected me, that I should not reign over them. Again, looking at the physical, not realizing you're rejecting your father. It's like
your heavenly father.
Yes, it's like going to, I don't know, your mama and saying, Daddy ain't doing right, go get me a new daddy. That's what it's like. And your daddy's been working hard.
Right.
He's busting his butt to give you everything, but you didn't get this little
One
toy.
Thing you didn't get, now you want a new
little,
one.
a small little conflict, and now you want a new daddy.
Right.
That's exactly
that
what
ain't
it
right.
is.
That is not right at all.
Verse 8.
But I also like that Samuel, I like this about Moses, I like this about Samuel. You know, you see, you know, the prophets of God or those who are his mouthpiece, you know, they really go to the God of Israel for direction, right? They have a trust in him and they understand it's not about them, right? It's about serving this God. It's about the nation. So Samuel, you know, his sons was doing bad. He was what they say, nepotism. He was like, he's going to always stand with the Lord God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. That was always his route to take, and that's why he took this back. He was grieved by what they were saying. He's like, this is what they want.
It's on his heart.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm just thinking, you know, the same thing happened with Eli, who was Samuel's mentor. Eli's sons were
acting crazy too.
And he was like, when Samuel was young and he had that dream, he was like, don't worry about that. Like, tell me what the Lord has given you and I'll focus on that. So it's an excellent quality to have. And it's a hard one to have, to, you know, look past the love of your children, understand that this is bigger than you. It's bigger than that. And that's so amazing to me. That is
true. It is interesting how that connection between Eli and Samuel, and you kind of saw, like, you could see Eli was a mentor to Samuel. You saw the same with Moses and Joshua, right? That closest and a mentor. And the one that came to take over the helm after had those same traits, right? So it's very
And we're going to get into it later as well, but I think it's important to know, like, in the nation, to think about your role as an elder, an auntie, a cousin, a mentor as well. And if you understand your worth, seeing the worth of others and helping them to build
the right thing.
Exactly.
Yep, agreed.
I believe I'm on verse 8, yes. According to all the works which they have done since the day that I brought them up out of Egypt, even unto this day, wherewith they have forsaken me and served other gods, so do they also unto thee. Now therefore hearken unto their voice, howbeit yet protest solemnly unto them, and show them the manner of the king that shall reign over them. And Samuel told all the words of the Lord unto the people that asked of him a king. You know, we always go back to the Red Sea, that rapport.
Right.
The God of Israel
Remember
proved
what I
himself.
did. Oh, yes, he did. In so many ways.
Yes.
But we always forget.
Forget.
And he's always telling us to remember what he did. How he brought us out of Egypt, and all the nations trembled because of the power of our God.
That part. They knew our war.
They knew.
They knew
Other
who we
nations
were.
see it. Other people see it, but we don't see it ourselves. And we want to follow them. When we are the prize, when we are the royal priesthood, when we are the prince and princesses of the creator of heaven and earth. How is it that that's not enough? You know what I'm saying? But it's when, as we talked about, is when we focus on the physical and we don't feed our spirit and align with the God of Israel, it sways us.
It does.
It leads us to following, right? Because we get caught up and we get enticed back to Genesis in the garden, the enticement of the world and the physicality of things instead of feeding our spirit.
I think that's so important. We talk so much about, I think it's relatively new that's been added, but we talk about when we think health, we think exercising, eating right, maybe mental health, but we have to put spiritual health at the forefront, because if you're sick spiritually, you can't do anything else. It makes you act in different ways.
Absolutely.
It makes you open and vulnerable. We talked about when you know your self-worth, you are doing certain things to empower yourself and protect yourself. And because it's coming from within, it allows you to walk in your path of righteousness, make more bolder decisions without obstacles, being successful. Things from the outside can't
affect
come
you
in because
you're
it's here.
strong,
It's written. They talk about laws in your inward hearts, right? It's so
exactly.
important.
It is. No doubt.
Let's see, verse 11.
So at this point, Samuel's going to go back to the people and tell them, you know, if you want a king, this is what it's going to look like. Okay? Do you still want this king? This is what it's going to look like.
And he said, "This will be the manner of the king that shall reign over you. He will take your sons and appoint them for himself, for his chariots, and to be his horsemen, and some shall run before his chariots. And he will appoint him captains over thousands, and captains over 50s, and will set them to ear his ground, and to reap his harvest, and to make his instruments of war, and instruments of his chariots. And he will take your daughters to be confectioners, and to be cooks, and to be bakers. And he will take your fields, and your vineyards, and your olive yards, even the best of them, and give them to his servants." And we can skip down further, but he's laying out to them, you know, this is all the things that are going to happen. And if you can see, it's not going to be flowers and great, fluffy, I can't even think. It's not going to be a great thing. There are consequences to this ask of
you have to give
others
something of yourself, even down to your children.
Yes.
Right? Because the king has to have his
you have to give up your values,
court.
yourself.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
to build this up.
Yep.
And
whereas before, all you had to do was serve your heavenly king,
your father, praise
who had
him.
all that. You didn't need to have a physical chariot because he had the chariots of fire and that was spiritual, right? So, this is
And then I want to skip down to verse 18. It gets worse. "And ye shall cry out in that day because of your kings, which ye shall have chosen you. And the Lord will not hear you in that day. Nevertheless, the people refused to obey the voice of Samuel. And they said, Nay, but we will have a king over us, that will also may be like all the nations, and that our king may judge us and go out before us and fight our battles."
What a slap in the face.
And Samuel heard all the words of the people.
I just got to strike.
He rehearsed them in the ears of the Lord.
Oh my goodness. This just gave me a sharp pain in my head just to think. Oh my goodness. They're like, yes, we want this because we want to be like everybody else. And our king, you know what he's going to do? He's going to judge us. He's going to go out and fight for us. All the things that the God of Israel did and did so well, they're willing to trade it in for a physical man.
And I'm just like, God of Israel has so much mercy
and
to
patience,
hear that.
long suffering.
To hear that, it pricks you.
It does.
But I also have to try to take myself from this idealistic view and like try and put myself into it, to just understand that it's not always as simple as we think it is. To be like, oh, I wouldn't do that. Like
Well,
was
you
so
got to think about Samuel's sons. Like, that was trifling behavior that they were
that could
doing.
have
You know what I'm
impacted
saying?
them.
You're
That's
coming to
true.
a man of God to say, I need this, and they're bribing you.
Yeah.
Like,
oh,
you-
that you're right. Who is bribing them? That's a good.
Yeah, I mean, like, that's tough. This is supposed to be a man of God. He's bribing you for something that you need for your family. You're like, no. Let's get somebody else that's going to be accountable. Yeah, they might do this and that, but it's better than this. You know? So I guess that's how you can rationalize it. Instead of pray to our God. You know what I'm saying? This is what's happening to us. Samuel's sons are doing this and this and that. Let the God of Israel handle it. You know what I'm saying? And even Samuel, he's honorable.
Yes.
But it just, it's so funny because you think, what's more to this story? Like, why did Samuel nip this in the bud? Like,
I know.
What she's doing? Like, what's up? Like, I don't know. It makes you wonder.
Especially because Eli had the same thing. I'm like, But no, something I just think is interesting is like they were so blinded by their desires and wants that they weren't willing to really understand like how their desire would hurt them or not add value to themselves.
Or even hurt the God of Israel.
Yes.
He was just left totally out of the equation. Like totally left out. And that's the thing. We have to always keep the God of Israel at the forefront of our lives. Like they're saying, God of Israel over everything. When we do that and we walk in that, we can't go wrong. That's going to be our guide, our direction to peace and prosperity.
Absolutely.
But when we put him last, or he's not even a thought in the equation, no, it's not going to be good.
Be successful in anything. And I think it's an important, I keep saying important point, but it's true because it's like, how do you make sure that, your spirituality is at the forefront, especially in every day? And I feel like incorporating some sort of like reflection is really important to like, again, Israel constantly, like we always say, we're a forgetful people. So I know for me personally, something I've been doing a lot more recently is just sort of journaling, and it allows me to like go back and see my personal growth and development and how that ties to my spirituality, because it's always framed in sort of like I'll outline my Abib goals for the year and then write down what happens accordingly. And when I read it, I feel so much content, gratefulness, and just my faith is increased by the God of Israel.
You can literally see how he's manifest these things that you needed and guided you.
Absolutely. So I think it's important to ask yourself always, like, how are you making sure that you're reflecting and not forgetting what has been done for you?
That's true. Because even with journaling, sometimes it's a great thing, because I always like it when I do it and I can look back and see. But the thing is,
it's hard to get started,
consistent with
before I would be like journal every 6 months. It wasn't working.
But if you can't journal, it is still good to have that reflective question that you're asking yourself on a regular basis. Yeah, and even in prayer, how are you growing spiritually? What have I done for the God of Israel today? What have I done for the nation this week?
Yes.
Have those regular checks, right? Because if you, at the end of the week, you haven't thought about the God of Israel, you haven't thought about the Israelite Nation Worldwide Ministries, something's wrong. Something's off. You know what I'm saying? For me, God of Israel is a daily thought in my mind. From when I get up in the morning and breathe the air and have the breath of life, I'm giving thanks. You know what I'm saying? When I lay my head down and I'm at peace, I'm giving thanks because I know so many people don't have it, right? So many people are afraid and fear and hopeless, all of that. I don't have it because I know my word. I know who my God is, and I'm not perfect, but I know I'm trying to serve him the best that I can, uplift and grow this nation, and support my brethren. You know what I'm saying? And you can't go wrong when you're doing those things.
Absolutely. Can we get some 7s and 5s in the chat?
Some thumbs up.
Donations if you're really feeling it.
Yeah, good point, you guys. So please, thumbs up, donations. We're not getting paid for this. The donations help us to spread the word about what we're trying to teach. In addition, when the lesson's over tonight and the broadcast is over, go out and comment on the video. If you have questions about what we're saying, or you have a point that you want to share, go out there and put a comment. We'd love to hear it, and we will respond to it. So please do that. We talked a little bit about, our whole emphasis tonight is about knowing your worth as an Israelite. And what's part and parcel to knowing your worth is making sure that we lead other nations and not follow them. But another important aspect about knowing your worth is, when the God of Israel blesses you with, physical or spiritual blessings, it's important that we use that blessing or even the influence that comes from that blessing wisely, right?
Yeah.
So if we're blessed with the knowledge of this scriptures and we go out and we teach people the wrong way, that's not cool, right? We need to teach people the right way, but also teach them by leading in an example of it, right? Not telling someone you need to do this, but you're doing something different. So it's important that when we have this influence from being an Israelite and having knowledge of who we are and our God, that we use that wisely. Use it wisely when we're blessed with the understanding to teach others, or even blessed with material things. How do we use that? Some people, we see it in the scriptures, they get all arrogant when you get a lot of stuff. They think, this, they all that, whatever. But when you think about somebody like Job, who lost everything, everything, and he was blessed exponentially, but he never cursed God after all that he went through. Even his wife was like,
trying to
curse God, right, and be done with it. But he was like, no. He was strong spiritually enough to stay the course, and he trusted in the God of Israel. He knew the God of Israel's value in his life, right? Hence in his own, and he didn't give up. But we have other examples of differently. But let's delve into that a little bit, understanding our influence and using it wisely. So you have something that you want to share?
Yeah, so I'd like to turn to Genesis chapter 27. We're going to look at the story of Rebekah and her two sons, Jacob and Esau. We know this one. So Genesis chapter 27, we're going to start with verse 1 for some background. And it came to pass that when Isaac was old and his eyes were dim, so that he could not see, he called Esau his eldest son, and said unto him, My son. And he said unto him, Behold, here am I. And he said, Behold now, I am old, I know not the day of my death. Now therefore take, I pray thee, thy weapons, thy quiver and thy bow, and go out to the field and take me some venison. So just a background, Jacob is getting old and he's about to pass away. So as part of this custom, he's going to give his blessings to his son. His firstborn, of course, is going to get that birthright. But we're going to see something, sort of shift, something's going to happen. So let's go to verse 5. And Rebekah heard when Isaac spake to Esau and his son. And Esau went to the field to hunt for venison and to bring it. And Rebekah spake unto Jacob her son, saying, Behold, I heard thy father speak unto Esau thy brother, saying, Bring me venison, and make me savory meat, that I may eat, and bless thee before the Lord before my death. Now therefore, my son, obey my voice according to that which I command thee. Go now to the flock, and fetch from thence 2 good kids of the goats, and I will make them savory meat for thy father, such as he loveth. And thou shalt bring it to thy father, that he may eat, and that he may bless thee before his death.
Wow.
I think this is such an interesting example.
It is.
There's a little,
favoritism
for
occurring,
sure. Right? But I think it really goes back to the idea of what we said earlier, knowing yourself. In order to know your worth, you must know yourself. And thinking from the role of a parent, a mother, or even a mentor, etc. You know your children, and you know the people that you are around, and so you are able to see what they are worth. And in this example, we see, because as the story goes, Rebekah is going to make it seem that Jacob is Esau, so he gets that birthright, that blessing, as we saw in the commandment. Rebekah knows her sons.
Right.
She knows what her sons are worth. And because of that, she made sure that Jacob was empowered and protected with this type of blessing that he deserved.
Right. She knew which one needed to be blessed as the firstborn. Yeah.
And I think it's important as roles, when you're in a role of leadership or mentor, to really ask yourself if you're able to see those things in order to really allow younger children or whoever it is you have that relationship with to grow. Because I think about the story of Moses when he was a babe and Pharaoh had the decree to kill all the firstborn males. Moses' mother saw that he was different, and so she knew what to do to make sure that he was protected. And because of that, Israel was saved. Like, our legacy was restored. We got to know our God because of that. Our worthiness was restored because of her ability to see that.
That's an excellent point. That we as elders, leaders, aunties, uncles, we have the ability to help the younger generation, the next generation, aspire to greater things based on what we can probably see. A child might have a certain talent. It's up to us to help foster that. The parents, but not only the parents, but the nation, the family together, to foster the growth, the spiritual growth and the physical growth of our children, so that they can walk into their blessing, which in turn will bless us and bless the nation. Amen. It's a beautiful thing when you really think about it. And I agree wholeheartedly that Rebecca, she knew her sons. She knew which one deserved to have this blessing. And she really had a great relationship with him because she said, obey my voice. And, a lot of people tend to say, women shouldn't speak or tell a man what to do. That's foolishness. Our women are the first teachers to our children. Yes. And she said, obey my voice. He wasn't a little baby. He was old enough to go out hunting and do what have you. So that says a lot about her role, her influence, right? As a woman, as a mother, as a relationship with her son. Because they were close, he did what she said. I mean, he literally dressed up and put fur. You know what I'm saying? That's a lot. But he didn't question her. He trusted her. He trusted her, right? And you see what happened.
And you can't have that trust without knowing each other. So I think it's also important. I think sometimes, even I myself, you think, okay, like, I want to help grow and nurture some of the people in the nation. But sometimes, sitting won't come to you. They say it like when you're in the job search, like, if you sit and don't do anything, it's not just going to fall in your lap. Usually, you got to do something. So, getting to know your brother and talking to them. I love the example of Mordecai with his, niecey cousin, Esther. She was nervous to do this thing, and he set her straight, okay? It was some tough love there. He said,
told her, you can't think of just yourself.
Think not that you will escape this. It will be someone else, and you will be cursed. Your spot.
That is true.
He knew what his relative, his brethren needed to hear
to make them do. Yeah, absolutely. I agree.
And I think some people might be like, wow, Rebecca, do that. But Esau's response to Jacob's proposition, I think, tells you who he was as a person, right? What he valued. She knew that.
And it showed, what he valued and what was. And even later on, we see the seed of Esau. God originally said he hated Esau.
Yeah, so
there's a reason for that, right?
You got it. Yeah, mothers know. They know. Okay, they know
whether they like it or not. She knew, and she used her influence to manifest the will of our God, because the blessing would be Abraham to Isaac, Isaac to Jacob, right? So she manifests that. She used her influence to make that happen. And she used her influence from a positive perspective. So, I don't know, did you have anything to add to that story? Or
no, I think it transitions well into your next story, just sort of about, I think society pushes us to think very individualistic. So, like, success is, getting good in your career. It's more so focused on you, whereas Israel, we need to make sure that we're thinking of the whole picture.
Right.
We know our worth, and we know the worth of others, our brethren, and so we should treat them correctly.
Right. I agree. So we're going to look at another example of using your influence, but in a not so positive way. But there's also a negative aspect to this, but also within this story, there's a positive part too.
It's twofold.
So it's twofold. So let's go to 1 Samuel, and we're going to go to chapter 25. And we're going to start with, I believe, verse 1. Yep. All right. So we're going to read again 1 Samuel chapter 25, verse 1. And again, our overall topic tonight is about knowing your worth as an Israelite and walking in that. We don't want to follow other nations. We want to lead other nations. But we also, when we are empowered with this influence, so to speak, we use it wisely, right? So we just talked about an example of Rebecca using her influence in a positive way. But we have another example that's a little different. So it starts off with verse 1, and it says, "And Samuel died, and all the Israelites were gathered together and lamented him, and buried him in his house at Ramah. And David rose and went down to the wilderness of Paran. And there was a man in Moab whose possessions were in Carmel, and the man was very great, and he had 3,000 sheep and 1,000 goats, and he was shearing his sheep in Carmel. Now the name of this man was Nabal, and the name of his wife Abigail, and she was a woman of good understanding, of a beautiful countenance. But the man was churlish and evil in his doings, and he was of the house of Caleb." All right, so we know in this setting, Samuel's passed on. David, was going out to a different land, and he passed by this land of another Israelite man who had great substance. He was blessed, not only in the physical realm, but he also had a wife that was of good understanding, and we'll see that in the story unfold of her understanding, and she was beautiful. And it says, verse 4, "And David heard in the wilderness that Nabal did shear his sheep. And David sent out 10 young men, and David said unto the young men, Go you up to Carmel, and go to Nabal, and greet him in my name. And thus shall ye say to him that liveth in prosperity, Peace be both to thee, and peace be to thine house, and peace be unto all that thou hast." So they're coming in peace, not discord. They're coming in peace. They understand this man is prosperous. Hey, David has an army of men. He could come and be ready to tear stuff up, but he's like, I'm coming in peace. Verse 7, "And now I have heard that thou hast shearers. Now thy shepherds which were with us, we hurt them not, neither was there aught missing unto them, all the while they were in Carmel. Ask thy young men, and they will show thee. Wherefore let the young men find favor in thine eyes, for we come in a good day. Give, I pray thee, whatsoever cometh in thy hand, unto thy servants and to thy son David." So it's almost like even David's men sort of protected his shepherds, So he's like, we come in peace, we helping you out, brethren, we
exactly.
good, right? Can you maybe give some victuals to my men, or help feed them, or you're doing this, you sharing your sheep,
by them.
You're going to get some prosperity from that, right? From the sheep, the wool, right? And I'm sure the meat as well. So share a little of that, basically what David is asking. Verse 9, "And when David's young men came, they spake to Nabal according to all those words in the name of David, and ceased. And Nabal answered David's servants and said, Who is David? And who is the son of Jesse?" Now, if you're saying who is the son of Jesse, then you know who David is, right?
It's pulling a Mariah Carey. I don't know her. Who's that?
Petty
boots.
I mean, he's using his, anyway. "There be many servants nowadays that break away every man from his master. Shall I then take my bread and my water and my flesh that I have killed from my shearers and give it unto men, whom I know not whence they be?"
I, not remembering family.
Not. So David's young men turned their way and went again and came and told him all those things. And David said unto his men, Gird you on every man his sword.
Lord.
David's not playing. He's about to tear some stuff up. Like, I came to you correct. I was humble. I was peaceful. We watched out for your shepherds. And this is how you're going to treat me? Okay. We're going to handle this. We're going to handle this. And they girded on every man his sword. And David also girded on his sword. And they went up after David, about 400 men, and 200 abode by the stuff. But one of the young men told Abigail, Nabal's wife, saying, Behold, David sent messengers out of the wilderness to salute our master, and he railed on them.
Lord.
But the men were very good unto us, and we were not hurt, neither missed we anything, as long as we were conversant with them when we were in the field. So they were protected, right? David's men protected the shepherds of Nabal. And it says, verse 16, they were a wall unto us, both by night and day. So basically a wall of defense. They protected them. And the while we were with them, keeping the sheep. Now therefore know and consider what thou wilt do, for evil is determined against our master and against all his household, for he is such a son of Belial that a man cannot speak to him. So Nabal forgot who he was.
Yes.
He's being called a son of Belial. That's another god. You're not acting like an
An
Israelite
Israelite,
that you are,
exactly.
you know, because you should know better.
Mhm.
Brethren treat you right, you treat
Treat them
brethren
right.
right. You know what I'm saying? So who's your spiritual father?
And I think what's so cool about this story too is the servant knows to go to Abigail.
Right, because she has good understanding,
Yes.
right?
He's like, something's probably gonna happen.
I need to save
We're
my
probably
butt.
gonna
Leave
die.
my outside.
I'm gonna go talk to his wife.
Right.
And so we see already her influence. She, like we said earlier, like people know that there's something about you. Beautiful
Mhm.
countenance. Like there's something about you. They know that you have good understanding when you know
and
your
you don't
worth.
have to tell people. She
Mm-mm.
didn't have to go and say, I'm of good countenance.
No,
I'm
he
beautiful.
went to her.
He already knew.
They seek you out.
Right.
Because of it.
Absolutely. I agree. So how did Abigail respond? Well, in verse 18 it says, Then Abigail made haste and took 200 loaves and 2 bottles of wine and 5 sheep ready dressed and 5 measures of parched corn and 100 clusters of raisins and 200 cakes of figs and laid them on asses. And she said unto her servants, Go on before me. Behold, I come after you. But she told not her husband Nabal. And it was so, as she rode on the ass, that she came down by the covert of the hill, and behold, David and his men came down against her, and she met them. Let's see. I want to read on. I'm going to go to verse 23. It says, And when Abigail saw David, she hasted and lighted off the ass and fell before David in her face and bowed herself to the ground. So she was humble and fell at his feet and said, Upon me, my Lord, upon me, let this iniquity be. And let thine handmaid, I pray thee, speak in thine audience and hear the words of thy handmaid. Let not my Lord, I pray thee, regard this man of Belial, even Nabal. For as his name is, so is he. Nabal is his name, and
Lord.
folly is with him. But I, thine handmaid, saw not the young men of the Lord whom thou didst send. Now therefore, my Lord, as the Lord liveth, and as thy soul liveth, seeing the Lord hath withholden thee from coming to shed blood, and from avenging thyself with thine own hand, now let thine enemies and they that seek evil to my Lord be as Nabal. So basically, she's petitioning David to, well, first of all, she's saying, look, I'm sorry, I didn't know this all happened. Let me make it right. She came very humbly. And I'm not going to read the whole story, but essentially, her good understanding tells, and she petitions David not to do this thing so the blood is not on his hands. And he's very appreciative of that because, later on, that's the reason why he couldn't build the temple. But she was just trying to make sure that sin was not on his hands to kill brethren, right? So, she was blessed. He didn't kill them. And when Nabal, it got back to him what he had done, he actually ended up dying on his own. His heart just failed him, right? And Abigail later ended up being David's wife, one of his wives. So it's an interesting.
You don't act like how you were supposed to as a child of God, royalty, as a brother. You can lose a lot. You can lose your wife.
And David, he ended up being the king of Israel. You never know who people are gonna become or be. So just treat people right. You know what I'm saying? When his brethren treat people right,
because it increases us. We're
it
able
does.
To be more united that way.
And we can grow and prosper together. It doesn't have to be just you prospering. Open yourself up.
It's not a competition.
It's not. It's a family. It's a family affair. It's an understanding we have one heavenly Father, and we should treat each other like brothers and sisters. Amen.
Amen.
All right. So good stuff. So again, we're talking about using our influence wisely. When we understand who we are and our worth and value, we will be blessed. We have to use our understanding wisely. We treat our brethren right. Stay humble. All these things. And I think you have another story that you want
I'd like to flip to 1 Peter chapter 3.
And I hope you like what we're saying.
Yes.
The story of Nabal. I think it's a great example. If you like what you're hearing tonight, if this resonates with you, can give us some fires in the chat, some 7s, some thumbs up. If you have questions, you can comment after tonight's broadcast. We'd love to hear from you. But yes, thumbs up, some fires, and some 7s.
All right, so we're going to start 1 Peter chapter 3, and we're going to start from verse 8. And it reads, verse 8. Finally, be ye all of one mind, having compassion one of another, love as brethren, be pitiful, be cautious, not rendering evil for evil or railing for railing, but contrarize blessing, knowing that ye are thereunto called, that ye should inherit a blessing. For he that will love life and see good days, let him refrain his tongue from evil, and his lips, that they speak no guile. So this is a very powerful verse.
Yeah, 3 verses say a lot.
We talked about earlier with Nabal how to treat your brethren, because of course we're all royalty, we're all worthy, so we'll be treating each other that way. What I think is so important is, not getting caught up in mistakes that may happen. It says, don't get caught up in railing for railing. We may hear the term an eye for an eye, right?
You did this to me, I'm going to do this to you.
That's not how brethren act. Yeah. And again, I don't want to oversimplify the scriptures, because when I think about it, if we're family, for those of you that have siblings, it can be really hard sometimes
to take the high road, like Michelle Obama said, go high when they go low.
Because you go high sometimes. From personal experience, not to put my siblings' business out there, but McNeil children, we got mouths, okay? And I be wanting to go back and forth with my siblings, but as I get older, I start to question, how do I want to conserve my energy? Is it worth it? And it makes me
like pick your battles.
Yes.
Yeah.
But it also makes me think of this one instance with my littlest sister. I don't know, she did something, and I was like, this is one of those things, I can't go eye for eye, bat for bat. So let me try something different. Let me see a different solution and see if I can get to something more positive. And I remember I told her, what you did, it really hurt me. I can't believe you would do something to hurt me like that. And it pricked her. I walked away and she ended up crying. And then she came to me and she apologized. And in that moment, I think it's a great example, because it really shows the power of vulnerability. Instead of going eye for eye, I told her, you hurt me. And then she was vulnerable and cried. And it allowed us to strengthen our bond.
And heal that offense.
Exactly. Yeah. And because I acted in that way, it's so important as brethren to allow ourselves to be vulnerable. Yeah. Instead of getting fiery headed like we saw with Nabal,
right.
Let's be like Abigail.
Even David, he was like, I'm about to tear some stuff up. But Abigail was like, no.
That was vulnerable.
Don't let the blood be on your hand.
Exactly. And that allows for us to have stronger relationships.
Agreed.
So that we can be in one accord and unity. We hear the story of Pentecost. All one spirit, one nation.
One God.
2 spirits cannot occupy the same space.
Nope.
And so if we are aligned with God, we have to be aligned within the nation.
Amen.
So we have to have that vulnerability, but vulnerability cannot happen without trust. We have to trust each other and act in that way.
Yeah. And, it talks about the compassion that we have for one another, like putting each other in each other's feet, so to speak, or shoes, understanding, why is this person maybe acting this way? And having compassion, and you're just like, you don't think they're pitiful, but you have pity, for their circumstances, why they may be acting this way, instead of, like you said, combating with, if they come at you with some bad words, you go back. Let's try a different approach. Let's try to understand where they're coming from and see if that works, and it may, like you described the situation with Dinah, how it pricked her, so she was able to apologize and redirect the situation. But I agree, it's important how we interact with one another as brethren. When we are on one accord, we can reach amazing heights as a people. And it's important, like in scripture says, let your tongue refrain from evil and lips that speak guile, and do good and seek peace, right? And ensue it. Like that's the overall objective, is peace, right? That's why when we greet each other, we say peace be unto you, right? That is the ultimate goal for us. And it, talks about, for the eyes of the Lord are over the righteous, and his ears are open unto their prayers, but the face of the Lord is against them that do evil. In particular, for those that do evil against brethren.
Yes.
Right? So it's very important as to how we use our influence. We want to use it wisely. We don't just want to go out willy-nilly and use it in a way that hurts the nation, hurts others, and even hurts ourselves, right? Because in Nabal, he ended up dying based on his behavior. So it's interesting. It's interesting.
And then I want to skip to verse 13, because it leads up into something so important, which is, and who is he that will harm you, if ye be followers of that which is good? But and if ye suffer for righteousness' sake, happy are ye, and be not afraid of their terror, neither be trouble. So again, we
mhm,
always have to think big picture. You brought up an excellent example with Job. He
mhm,
suffered because the devil was trying to influence him.
mhm.
But in the end, we saw how Job was blessed. And it
Right.
touches to the point, you know, I think of the story of Jesus, like the physical suffering that he had to go through, but
For
he
us.
knew what
Mhm.
would come after. He knew that this was beyond the
Him.
physical
Yeah.
and him as
Yeah.
well. And because of
Mhm.
that, we are here today, able
Today.
to do so much more.
Right, and not
it's-
having to have all those animal sacrifices that we couldn't do
Because
anyway.
we're too poor,
Right.
which is why you should donate. But it's so important. Like we have to know that this is bigger than us, and the suffering is short-lived and is oftentimes should not even be at the forefront of our mind, which is something that a big thing to do, but that's what we got to do.
Right, I agree. Yep. So we're going to touch on one more example because I think in our influence, a lot of times it's about perspective. And, you know, depending on how we perceive things can influence our brethren, and sometimes it can stifle our growth and our prosperity.
It's true.
So let's go to Numbers chapter 13. And just to give some context, this is when we came out of Egypt, and it was time for us to go in to the promised land. And it says, let's see. We're going to start at verse 1. And it says, And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Send thou men that they may search the land of Canaan, which I give unto the children of Israel. Of every tribe of their fathers shall ye send a man, every one a ruler among them. And Moses by commandment of the Lord sent them from the wilderness of Paran. All those men were heads of the children of Israel. And then the verses go down to kind of call out the names. We're going to skip down to verse 26. We're in the same chapter of Numbers, chapter 13. Verse 26 says, And they went and came to Moses and to Aaron and to all the congregation of the children of Israel unto the wilderness of Paran to Kadesh, and brought back word unto them, unto all the congregation, and showed them the fruit of the land. So basically Moses sent out spies to search out the land, the promised land, and just really before they kind of go in to take it over, they wanted to know what they had to deal with, right?
Scoop it out.
So a representative from each tribe went, and they came back with their report. And verse 27 says, And they told him and said, We came into the land whither thou sent us, and surely it floweth with milk and honey, and this is the fruit of it. So they showed them samples of the fruit of the land. Nevertheless, the people be strong that dwell in the land, and the cities are walled and very great. And moreover, we saw the children of Anak there. The Amalekites dwell in the land of the south, and the Hittites and the Jebusites and the Amorites dwell in the mountains, and the Canaanites dwell by the sea and by the coast of Jordan. So again, in the physical eye, this is all that they see. The challenges that are ahead, right? They're thinking physically. Verse 30, And Caleb stilled the people before Moses and said, Let us go up at once and possess it, for we are well able to overcome it. So why do you think Caleb says that?
I think it goes back to, it reminds me of David, to be honest. When you know your worth, they say that you're able to make decisions more boldly, more confidently.
Right, and you sense that here. Let's go. I don't care about, the Amalekites.
He knows what? He knows
his God.
Exactly.
Yes, he has that spiritual foundation. He knows his worth. He knows his value, right? What the God of Israel promised, what the God of Israel did in bringing them out of Egypt. He's remembering all of that, Verse 31. But the men that went up with him said, We be not able to go up against the people, for they are stronger than we. And they brought up an evil report of the land which they had searched unto the children of Israel, saying, The land which we have gone to search it is a land that eateth up the inhabitants thereof, and all the people that we saw in it are men of great stature. And there we saw the giants and the sons of Anak, which came of the giants, and we were in our own sight as grasshoppers, and so we were in their sight. So again, in the physical eye, they are seeing this. This is what's happening. And then if we go down to, if we go to Numbers 14 and we read verses 20, starting with verse 20, we'll see what the God of Israel said. And the Lord said, I have pardoned according to thy word. But as truly as I live, all the earth shall be filled with the glory of the Lord. Because all those which men who have seen my glory and my miracles which I did in Egypt and in the wilderness, and have tempted me now these 10 times, and have not hearkened to my voice, surely they shall not see the land which I swear unto their fathers, neither shall any of them that provoke me see it. But my servant Caleb, because he had another spirit with him, he hath followed me fully. Him will I bring into the land whereunto he went, and his seed shall possess it.
Boom.
So it's all about perspective. It's all about perspective. How you think when you have a challenge. You know, what the bad report, the folks who gave the bad report, that's influencing the people. That's scaring the people. But Caleb's like, no, remember what our God did. He's got us. We can do it. We can do it. And I think that's a beautiful thing, a beautiful way to use our influence and our power to advance the nation so that they could go into the land flowing with milk and honey and take it and live there and dwell there and be in freedom. You know, it's a beautiful thing.
Continuing on with our discussion on knowing your worth, a really important aspect about knowing your worth is being progressive, right? We are building a nation. You know, we have to be on one accord and we're rebuilding a nation. We have to be on one accord to do that, and we have to think about solutions and not get stuck in the past through difficulties. And one amazing thing that Elder Shadrach has done is he was able to form the Progressive Women Association that just really speaks to building the nation. Like we said, mothers are first teachers. So how can we work to build up our Israelite women and of course our Israelite men to do what needs to be done
to move forward?
Yes.
Right? We don't want to go back to Egypt. We want to move progressively into our freedom and serving our God and rebuilding our nation to its former glory. So yeah, being progressive, I think, is critical into knowing your worth. If you know your worth, you're not going to stay stagnant. You're going to do things to build and create and multiply.
And think outside the box as well.
Right.
And a great example of that can be found in Exodus chapter 1 with the story of the midwives.
Oh yeah, that's a good example.
So we're going to turn to Exodus chapter 1 and we're going to start with verse 1. Now these are the names of the children of Israel which came into Egypt. Every man in his household came with Jacob. And so it goes to the 12 tribes, right? Descendants. So then verse 5. And all the souls that came out of the loins of Jacob were 70 souls, for Joseph was in Egypt already. And Joseph died, and all his brethren and all that generation. And the children of Israel were fruitful and increased abundantly, and multiplied, and waxed exceedingly mighty, and the land was filled with them. Listen, he was using a lot of redundants over there, okay? They was out here having babies.
Increase, abundance, mighty.
So we're setting the background, right? Verse 8. Now there arose up a new king over Egypt, which knew not Joseph. That says a lot, because Joseph did a lot that the Pharaoh, he was his right-hand man. Right. He had great status.
Yeah, at that time, you know, when Joseph was there, Egypt had famine, and Joseph's leadership got them through it, right?
Yes, with his
so
gifts.
That gave him a lot of prestige or power and influence with the Pharaoh of Egypt at that time. So everybody knew about this Joseph. But then that's why it's pointed out that there came one up that didn't know Joseph, so he didn't know all that background.
Didn't know whose God Joseph was.
Right.
So he was trying to treat us a certain way.
Right.
All right, verse 9. And he said unto his people, Behold, the people of the children of Israel are more and mightier than we.
Their value.
Come on.
Others see it.
Yes,
right? They can see it. They're
do.
more and mightier than we. So now let me do something about this. Sounds familiar.
Behold, the people of the children of Israel are more and mightier than we. Come on, let us deal wisely with them, lest they multiply, and it come to pass that when there falleth out in any war, they join also unto our enemies and fight against us, and so get them up out of the land.
You know, this makes me think about even today in this new Egypt. You know, when we think about even here in Georgia with some of the legislation with voter suppression, right? When he says here, let us deal wisely, right? Because a lot of folks here were upset that, you know, Georgia turned from a red state to a blue state, right?
So
because a lot of Jacobites went out and voted, right, and got some Democrats into office. So they were like, this can't happen again. So let us wisely and craftily, create some laws that will make sure that this never happens again. And it's the same thing. And I just like when people don't see themselves in the Bible, I don't know how not, because the stuff that is happening here is happening to us today. It's crafty, the things that they do. They call it Jim Crow 2.0 now, because they're trying to bring back the laws that oppressed us back in the 50s and those earlier times.
Hidden and clever
right, ways. And to continue it on even to today. So it's interesting how nothing's changed.
And so we see that Pharaoh is going to put out a decree where all the firstborn males, children will be killed, right? And that's where our strength comes from, the firstborn male. We saw it with Jacob and Esau, the birthright that came. So there's an understanding there. We're going to jump down to verse 15. Actually, yeah, let's keep to verse 15. And the king of Egypt spake to the Hebrew midwives. So again, they call us Hebrew because it's outsiders. We talk about bywords that us Israelites today are called African American, black. So it's the same thing here, Hebrew. Of which the name of one was Shipra, and the name of the other Puah. And he said, when ye do the office of a midwife to the Hebrew women, and see them upon the stools, if it be a son, then ye shall kill him. But if it be a daughter, then she shall live. And I also think about that as well. Like, if the men are being killed off, the woman will marry Egyptian men, strangers, right? So the separation can't happen.
Right.
Verse 17. But the midwives feared God. They knew their worth. And did not as the king of Egypt commanded them, but saved the men children alive. And the king of Egypt called for the midwives and said unto them, what have ye done this thing, and have saved the men children alive? And the midwives said unto Pharaoh, because the Hebrew women are not as the Egyptian women, for they are lively, and are delivered ere the midwives come in unto them. So they're not like the Egyptian women. They're delivering,
very clever.
They're delivering early. By the time we're there, the baby's already here, right?
Yeah, very
that
clever.
Progressive thinking. They understood that we have to have a nation. They cannot kill us out.
No.
There was a fear of God even when we were in bondage and lost. Right?
Yeah.
And they were able to think of a solution. They didn't give up. They didn't just say, oh my God, it's Pharaoh. I can't do anything. We got to kill him. They're like, how can we save this?
Right.
How
Solution.
can we, exactly. How can we uplift our nation and allow it to grow? That's an excellent way of thinking today, because I think sometimes we get so lost in the power of the man. We're like, we have no power, no control, but we have the spirit of the greatest God in the entire universe.
Amen. You gotta get some fire for that. Gotta get some fire for that, some sevens.
Fire, some likes in the chat.
As Israelites, we have the spirit of the true and living God, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. So when we have these fools coming up against us with crazy legislation or things to try to keep us down, we have to turn to our God. And we can't go outside of ourselves and do what others tell us to do. We have to stand strong and steadfast
in our values,
our values, our
morals,
core
just
values.
what this Bible says right here.
Yep. So true.
And so we're just going to read verse 21 to close it off. And it came to pass, because the midwives feared God, that he made them houses. And Pharaoh charged all his people, saying, every son that is born ye shall cast into the river, and every daughter ye shall save alive.
So it continued on. But we all know what happened. Moses came out of this. He delivered Israel out of Egypt through the God of Israel's mighty right hand. So stuff is going to happen. It's going to come against us, but we have to be progressive in our mindset, be solution oriented instead of defeated, right? Very important, very important. I know we're getting close to our time, but we just have a few more points to share. One, we're going to talk a little bit about, the progressiveness of Nehemiah, one of my favorite chapters of the Bible. When it was time when we were in captivity, he wanted to rebuild Jerusalem, right? Very progressive, because he was a king's cupbearer. He could have just stayed in that position and been good, right? He was taken care of, but no, he wanted to do something different.
He took initiative.
He was progressive. So let's go with his influence, right? Let's go to Nehemiah. We're going to start with the first chapter.
Nehemiah chapter 1.
Chapter 1. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but just basically to set some context, it just really bothered Nehemiah to his core that, the city of Jerusalem laid waste after the children of Israel were taken out into captivity. So he was the king's cupbearer, and he wanted to do something about it. Let's see. So in verse 12, I believe, no, let's see. Verse 12. No, I'm sorry, guys.
Chapter 1.
Yes, chapter 1. I'm trying to look for the verse. Okay, so he wanted to do something, and he went to the king, and he said in verse, we're actually going to go to chapter 2. Verse 2. Wherefore the king said unto him, why is thy countenance sad, seeing thou art not sick? There is nothing else but sorrow of heart. Then I was very sore afraid. So Nehemiah is looking down. He's depressed. He wants to go back to rebuild. He's seeing the land waste in Jerusalem. He wants to do something about it. So he's going to go to the king, and the king is like, why do you look so sad? Verse 3, and he said unto the king, let the king live forever. Why should not my countenance be sad when the city, the places of my father's sepulchres lie waste, and the gates thereof are consumed with fire? So the king goes on to say, what is your request? What do you want to do? And Nehemiah responds saying he wants to go back to rebuild Jerusalem. So if we kind of continue on, let's see, verse 12 of the same chapter 2, and it says, and I arose in the night, I and some few men with me, neither told I any man what my God had put in my heart to do at Jerusalem, neither was there any beast with me, save the beast that I rode upon. So I like that verse because in Nehemiah he's saying it's in his heart. This is something that was on him, like he was depressed, he was sad, because this is what he needed to do. And verse 13 says, and I went out by night by the gate of the valley, even before the dragon well, and to the dung port, and viewed the walls of Jerusalem, which were broken down, and the gates thereof were consumed with fire. Then I went to the gates. So he went to the different gates to see, the destruction. And he decided into himself that he wanted to rebuild. So if you go down into verse 18, it says, then I told them of the hand of my God, which was good upon me, and also the king's word that he had spoken to me. And they said, let us rise up and build. So they strengthened their hands for this good work. So he pulled in folks of a like mind, right, in his progressiveness of rebuilding Jerusalem to do the work to rebuild it. And if you read the whole, I know I kind of skimmed over it, but if you read the whole chapter, you will kind of see a beautiful story of his commitment. And you'll also see how folks came up against him to stop the work. But he didn't let that deter him. He kept going, and he kept going, and he was progressive, and he was successful in bringing Israel back to keeping their culture. I believe the first thing they did was the tabernacles, when you read the story. And again, that's our strength, our core values, so to speak. He came back to the God of Israel and was like, let me keep your holy days. Right, let me rebuild the walls of Jerusalem of the time when we had kings and queens and rulers. We had our own land and we were together as a people. So in that, again, that progressive mindset is so important as we know our value and our worth, and we use our influence for good and things that will move this nation forward. So I know we're at time, but I don't know if you had any other comments about just the progressive nature.
Progressiveness, I see Nehemiah and us now, trying to rebuild the nation. And I think another really good component to have is one, to allow yourself to be open to receiving the Spirit in order to do things to better not only yourself but the nation, which is what we see with Nehemiah, but also being in the land where there are other maybe mixed multitude, being open to new ideas, thinking outside of the box in order to build the nation. I think of the story of Jethro with Moses, Moses' father-in-law Jethro, beautiful relationship, traveled to see his son, and he sees that Moses is sitting here and all these people are asking for judgment, and it's waxing him. He's getting old in age, and he's like, Moses, I think he basically is the origin story of the judges, where the judges came out of. But what I love about that story,
but just back up and you think about it just for a second, really, think about it. A nation came out of Israel, right? And they had problems, and one man had to judge them and give them advice. That's heavy. That's a lot. Like from sun up to sundown, he's probably dealing with issues upon issues. And we know our people, right?
Yes, Moses was like,
you know our people, right? That was not easy.
No.
Yeah.
But what I think is so beautiful, even about that story, is Jethro's respect and understanding of our God being the greatest God, because he says, you know, what about having judges if that's in the way that your God would like that? He says it in the framework of having the God of Israel's confirmation through that. Mm-hmm. So he understands who Moses is and his God and the way that things work. Mm-hmm. And I think that touches again to the power of knowing your worth, is that others see it and they come to you correct.
It can help you.
And it can help you.
They can help you and advance you if you're open to it.
Absolutely.
So I think that's a beautiful example of that, right? Because sometimes people on the outside can help us, help us grow, help us be better. But we also got to remember our fundamental core of who we are and our laws, our statutes, our commandments, our covenant, and what the God of Israel requires. But that doesn't mean someone else can't help us be progressive and advance our nation. And we can be open to that, but just keep our fundamentals. So I know we're pretty much at time for tonight. I hope this message has resonated with you all about knowing your value as an Israelite. You Jacobites out there that are not knowing who you are, you know, this is what this doctrine has to offer you. You know, it gives you validation, it gives you integrity, it gives you empowerment so that you can maneuver in the world as a leader and not a follower, that you can be progressive and that you can use your influence to advance your people and not hinder your people. That's what it's all about, knowing your value and worth. And I'm so grateful for this opportunity to come before you tonight. I hope you enjoyed what we presented and that you will tune in for our Saturday broadcast at 2. And like I said, give us some thumbs up, go back and comment on our videos, and we thank you for your time this evening. Peace.